Since it's MLK Day and I'm off from work, which apparently I'm surprised at how many companies don't recognize MLK Day. But anyway, since I'm off from work, I thought it'd be fitting to visit the legacy of MLK, specifically what a lot of people talk about and the way that he failed. And this is the video I've been meaning to do specifically on this one topic, and that is integration. Now, what do you hear a lot of pro-blacks and even those on the right? Plenty of people. O'Shea just did a video about one. David Carroll constantly does videos about this number one failure. But despite what the pro-blacks, we all know who those goons are, and the, I guess, the more conservative, better men, as Panelist Risen once said, the one thing that they will agree on is this. Martin Luther King, specifically his integrationist policies, was the one thing that did the black community in and placed it in the current condition that it's in today. Now, as you all probably can guess from the videos, if you've been here for some time or look back at my other videos, I'm one who leans more towards an integrated society. Personally, for me, I would rather prefer that anyone has the right of freedom of association, which I know a lot of the alt-right uses as a bastardization, just like they used states' rights as a bastardization back in the day with Jim Crow. A lot of people on the right, particularly the alt-right or the Dixiecrats, will use freedom of association as a reason of not to integrate. But quite frankly, freedom of association is mainly used, in my belief, to integrate and to associate with whoever you want to. Specifically, if the person, like in my case, even though I may be African American predominantly, my culture and my outlook and the things I believe as for my basically my perspective doesn't align with that of the African American community, at least not that of today's African American community. Henceforth, I tend to associate, befriend, and date people outside my race for the most part. Not that I'm against befriending and dating people of my own race, which I do, mostly non-American blacks, but as I stated, the African American community is currently today in a hive mind mentality. And for the most part, I am not the one who is going to try to convince them to see the other way around, which is the reason why you don't see me making a lot of these videos of black men or black women who go after thugs and complaining about it. Not to guys who do that, and what they're saying is completely right. I sub to some of these guys, as a matter of fact, like Obsidian Man. He's been cooking black women who have been going after dope boys and thugs, and shout out to him for that. But I am not the kind of person who's going to waste my time convincing a community that does not want to be fixed to change their ways. But for me, as far as integration is concerned, it's simple. As far as Martin Luther King's aspect in integration, for starters, let's give credit to where credit's due. Martin Luther King's non-violent stance on things should be commended. It's one of the things that made essentially a lot of, well, you can call progress on the Civil Rights Act and a couple of other things. Now, granted, I think a lot of these Civil Rights Acts, particularly one in 1964, was a half-assed one, which has since been bastardized and has been hijacked to help gays, feminists, and other groups of people who weren't nearly as suppressed as blacks. If you really want to look at a civil rights or civil rights acts that specifically help blacks, and a president that specifically helped blacks, look no further than Dwight D. Eisenhower, who I consider to be one of the best presidents of all time, and the most pro-black president of all time. So if you really want a president to say, if you really want to look at a president and to look up to and credit some sort of progress towards African Americans, look no further than Dwight D. Eisenhower. And for all of you pro-black who say, oh, the white men they're holding black men. No. Specifically, yeah, anyway. I mean, and we all know the white presidents who have held black men down. You all just won't call them out. Name Johnson, anyone? I mean, hell, we can go to Bill Clinton anyway. Um, the point is that integration was started too soon. Integration, particularly in the southern states and throughout most of the country, was started too soon. Now, here's the thing that a lot of pro-blacks won't tell you, and a lot of black historians in general. Jim Crow and segregation was not a nationwide phenomenon. Specifically, the more west you went. You know, a lot of coastal states, a lot of coastal cities, it wasn't uncommon that you had blacks or certain blacks in non-black neighborhoods. It wasn't uncommon that you had, hell, it wasn't uncommon to see non-blacks patroning black businesses and go into black neighborhoods for business and commerce. I mean, and it wasn't even uncommon to see blacks dating outside their race, and specifically black men dating outside their race. I mean, there's a reason why places like Seattle, Portland to a certain extent, we can say Hawaii, but honestly that wasn't even touched by Jim Crow. So yeah, to the black men who were in Hawaii, or black people who were in Hawaii during that period, Jesus loved you. But California, even before a lot of the riffraff that went on, San Francisco at one point was probably one of the most forward-thinking cities in the country in regards to race. I mean, yeah, it's been hijacked by the more SJW progressive or regressive left whites who basically will like you if you're not black, but that's a whole nother story that I've gone into before and probably get into again. But there are plenty of places where there wasn't Jim Crow and segregation. Now, in places that there were legalized Jim Crow laws or de facto segregation, yeah, blacks were to an extent doing their thing. Blacks were in a better position than they were now. That I can admit. And the fact that a lot of them, maybe not a lot, because there were some resistance, including your Malcolm X, your authentic pro-blacks, your Black Panther movements, who were about doing for self. Yeah, you can argue about some of the more extreme views on fuck whitey and all that kind of stuff, but the fact that they wanted to do for self and protect their own was something that should be commended, and something that should have been more the focus of blacks, quite frankly, instead of begging people who hated you, who wanted nothing to do with you, and quite frankly, who outside of their deep south world or east of the Mississippi River world were seen as trash anyway. They were seen as European rejects, the European rejects that they actually were. I mean, you're looking at Italians and Irish people who came over here in the turn of the 20th century. They didn't come here because they wanted to find a new world and discover and all that kind of stuff. No, if you really look into it, a lot of them were driven out of Europe because they were the rejects of their society. Same thing with the Irish and Dutch who came here during the 18th century, or in the 19th century, I should say. A lot of them were seen as trash of their own society, and since they had such an inferiority complex, when they came here, they just shitted on everyone and anyone who didn't look like them and weren't them, including blacks. I mean, that's true history for you guys. But as far as integration is concerned, integration did happen too soon. I will admit that it did happen too soon. And what should have happened was this. Instead of asking whites, specifically, especially whites who didn't care about you and have historically hated you, a la liberals in the Democratic Party, what blacks should have done was basically stay to themselves. Stay to themselves, build up their own infrastructures, and essentially ignore some of the more negative attributes of white society, including the rise of feminism and a lot of other devious things that, not devious, but just a lot of other bullshit things that happen within white society that even whites will admit was bullshit. Feminism being the best example to point out, but what would have happened was this. Blacks at the time had a higher marital rate than whites. They had, I believe, a higher in wedlock birth rate than whites. They probably had a higher belief rate than whites, regardless of what you think about Christianity and religion in general. And in some places, they had a higher education rate than whites. What would have happened if blacks would have stuck to themselves, especially in those places where they weren't liked, was this. They would have built up infrastructures to the point in which their infrastructures would have looked better than some of the white infrastructures, especially in the Deep South. And a lot of the pro-blacks and a lot of these Negroes, mediocre Negroes, will say, well, they would have bombed again. They would have bombed and destroyed like they did to Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's why we can't build. And a lot of these Negroes are lazy. Quite frankly, these are the same Negroes who argue against integration for the simple fact that they want. It's sort of the reason why, how the hood rats and some of the Bedouins even argue about how good black men. I'm not going to even say the EL word because the L word to me is a 4-letter word. It's right up there with the N word. But these are the same people who basically just want good black men to come back and build the shit that they fucked up. That's one of the reasons why I'm especially not for self-segregation and rebuilding the black community and we gotta stick to ourselves. It's basically a bunch of hoodlums and hood rats asking good blacks to come back in and build the shit they fucked up. That's my other reason why I'm not as gung-ho about black reunification and you need to do for your own neighborhoods and come back and build the community now. I mean, I know Obsidian and O'Shea we're having a little debate about that, and as much as I respect both of them, I gotta agree a bit more with Obsidian's view on that. But on the point of integration, if blacks of then, not now, not these Negroes now, not these hood rats now that were spawns of the welfare state, but the blacks back then who were on point, whether it's your MLK kind or your Malcolm X kind, if they would have stuck together and did their own thing, quite frankly, America, or the black America in general, would be much more respected. And quite frankly, it would be because you would have other minorities, even some whites, specifically white females who saw past the bullshit that white men were on, and to an extent still are on these days, all the alt-right and some in the SJWF. They would have come to a more patriarchal community and would have parked there, would have set up base there, or would have, because let's face it, women in general respect masculinity. Blacks back then had masculinity. And black men and black people would have kept on the pace that they were in the 1960s and prior. A lot of races, especially those other races who were dogged out by whites, your Hispanics, your Asians, your Native Americans, they would have sought solidarity with the black community. Unlike today, how the majority of them kiss white ass by hating black people, it would have been, quite frankly, the opposite. Or at the very least, you would have had these other communities in opening, or at least not minding, blacks to associate with them. Hell, you would have had some whites, a lot of whites as a matter of fact, asking, not minding, shrugging their shoulders at the very least, or even begging blacks to integrate with them. And as a result, that would have caused integration by default. That would have caused integration on the terms of blacks. And what you would have had is basically all sorts of people begging blacks to be part of society. And what you probably would have now is sort of similar to what the Jews have. It's like Jews, yeah, people still talk shit about the Jews today, but one thing that Jews have that blacks don't: respect. Respect to the point in which if anyone brought a Jewish son home, they probably would at the very least accept it only for the fact because he has money. If not, they would have opened and welcome arms genuinely and say, hey, welcome to the family, blah, blah, blah. I hope you marry your daughters, blah, 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 blah. You don't get that with blacks. No, you get the quite opposite. And quite frankly, it's somewhat sad to see. And somewhat boils my blood to see what could have been if blacks would have stayed on that path of not necessarily being self-segregated for the point of just saying fuck whitey, but to do your own thing, to build your own infrastructure. As the saying goes, if you build it, they will come. And by they, from the looks of it, and from the history, and the reputation of blacks from the 60s and prior, they would have been damn near everyone. You all don't believe me, but this would have been the case, and this was somewhat the case back then. There were stories of non-blacks going to black infrastructures, checking out black colleges, going to black businesses or whatever, moving in black towns to an extent. All before the advent of the welfare state. And we all know what happened after that. No, you would have, as I said, you would have had some white people. So to all of you, since a lot of you love white so much, you would have had white people coming to you. And especially the dirt white trash, same ones who sympathize with the Klan and all this other shit, they would have offered their daughters to you. Even if it's just to boost them up and improve their lives and all this other for financial gains. But knowing the history of blacks and whites in this country, the black men was really militant. They probably would be very clannish and probably say no to a lot of these white females. And as a result of that reverse psychology effect, you would have had basically white women and other women banging at the doors of black men. And you would have had black women and non-black men getting together as well. That would have been there as well. Black women would have more of a standard of beauty in this country than they do now, for multiple reasons. But quite frankly, this is what would have been. Integration would have happened anyway. It just would have been on our terms. And I think this would have probably happened in the late 20th century, 80s, 70s, the 80s, 90s, that time. So, but this is what we have now. Hope you all enjoy it. And quite frankly, to all of you old Negroes, especially out there who are begging whites who hated you to let you in their whatever, I only have one thing to say. You dropped the fucking ball! And for everyone else out there, always bet on X.